And in this segment, what we're going to be talking about is short-term rentals and how all that plays out. Okay, so if you're not into the short-term rental game, you're really missing out on some huge tax savings. Now, I know there's income that can be made from doing short-term rentals, and if you've seen my channel, I've talked to several people about the money that can be made in short-term rentals and how to set that up. But it's the tax side that really gets people excited when it comes to using short-term rentals. And I'm not saying that you have to use short-term rentals full time, but the thing is that with short-term rentals, you can actually use them or use that property as a short-term rental for a bit. And then if you want to later on, you can turn that into a long-term rental after you've harvested the tax losses. So what I'm going to be sharing with you this afternoon is how to set up that structure for the short-term rentals and looking at it from the tax benefit side that comes from using it. All right, so with that being said, let me get everything hooked up here the right way, jump over the iPad, throw up the picture. All right, so when it comes to taxation in short-term rentals, the reason why people tend to gravitate towards this from a tax perspective is that you've probably heard of REPS before, right? That's real estate professional status. And there's a lot of benefits that come from being a real estate professional, but the problem with being a real estate professional or just qualifying for it is you have to spend 50% of your time and 750 hours in a real estate related activity. And so once you've satisfied that, okay, which is a hurdle in and of itself. So if you work for someone else, you're not going to qualify, or in a non-real estate related field, you're not meeting this test. So you have to actually go out there and work in a real estate related field 50% of your time and spend 750 hours to qualify for reps. And then once you get that done, then you need to what we call materially participate in your rental properties. And there's 7 different tests that you apply here. And of course, the 2 tests that most people use are 100 hours or 500 hours. 100 hours being that you spend 100 hours on your rentals, it's more than anyone else, or you spend 500 hours on your rental property, and it doesn't matter who spends what amount of time on there. So generally speaking, this is where a lot of people used to gravitate towards. And the reason they would do that is because if you qualify as a real estate professional, what you're doing is you're able to then take your losses that are considered passive from real estate. So for example, here, if I have all these properties that I own and they throw off with depreciation $30,000 in losses, if I qualified as a real estate professional with the material participation component, then those losses are no longer passive. They become just non-passive losses, which means I can then use them to offset my ordinary income. So if my spouse was generating $75,000 a year in her job, I could take the losses from my real estate, offset that, and just pay taxes on $45,000 in income. But the problem is that this is an onerous test for a lot of individuals. I work with a lot of physician clients who struggle with this because, as you can see, I mean, 750 hours and 50% of your time, if you don't work in that real estate related field, you're never gonna make it. So one of the benefits we have with short-term rentals is it allow us to apply a different test so that we can still get those losses, but we're not subject to this onerous 50% 750 hours. And this is what we tend to do or recommend to individuals who can't qualify for reps, but they have properties that they can harvest losses out of. I'm going to make a recommendation that you turn it into a short-term rental. At least initially you turn it into a short-term rental, and then you can change it to a long-term rental at a later date, and the purpose being to harvest the losses that come from the property. Okay, so what are we looking at here? So if you have a piece of property and you want to make this property a short-term rental, so there's basically 2 tests that we have to pass to turn this property into a short-term rental. The first test you can qualify under is that the average rental period is 7 days or less. So your average rental period is 7 days or less during the entire year. So you can have some rental periods of 12 days, some of 2, some of 21, some of 4, not too many of 21, hopefully. And then when you add them all up and you take the average of your rental periods, if the average rental period works out to be 7 days or less, you're on your way there. So you let the rental do the work for you just by keeping it under 7 days or less. Then, once you've met that prong, the second prong of this requires, and the easiest one I think, is the 100 hours requirement. So if you spend 100 hours on your short-term rentals, and that 100 hours is more than anyone else. So this is where you can get tripped up. If you have house cleaners come in and maintain your property, have them provide a time log. So if you're ever audited, you can say, well, when I had someone come in and do a turn, they would spend on average an hour, and I only did 50 turns this year, so we had 50 hours of time spent on this one property. Now, if you have 10 properties, you can see that that time's going to go up, and you're going to have 500 hours, you're going to have a problem there. But if you have one property and they spend 1 hour to do the turn, well, then you may make it. Or if they spend 2 hours, tell them on one of those 50 turns, they only spend an hour and they'll come in at 99 and you'll still beat them. So you have to keep track of your time and the time of other people who are coming in and working on your property. So that's the easiest one. If you can't satisfy the 100 hours, then you can always fall back on the safe default, which is 500 hours. But I find that most of the clients I work with, if they're investing in short-term rentals and they're looking to take advantage of this, they're really going to shoot for that 100-hour requirement. Now remember, when I say it's 7 days or less for the year, well, 7 days or less for the year means this taxable year. And here we are now in September. So you have October, November, December. You got 3.5 months left. I think you could probably do it. In fact, I helped a client last year do something similar. A physician that exited out of a clinic that he sold, had a big windfall, rolled it into a property, and we got some huge tax deductions, as I'll show you. So for short-term rentals, if you want to get your tax deductions, then what you want to do is first keep track of your average rental period and how much time you spend on your properties. Now, after that, if you can't satisfy the 7-day test, then there's a secondary test you can look at. It's called 30 days or less, all right? And you provide substantial services. So what do we mean by that? Well, if your average rental period is 30 days or less, and you provide substantial services, then you're going to be able to take that income and you're going to be able to make it non-passive. Again, assuming you also meet the material participation hours, 100 or 500. But the thing is, what they're looking for there is if it's not 7 days or less, but it's between 7 and 30 is your average rental period, then you're going to have to do a little bit more on your end to turn this property into something which the losses that flow from it can be used to offset your other income. So the question often comes up, what is considered to be substantial services? Well, I tell people, think of it as follows. If you were to go into a high-end rental, what types of things would you like maybe the owner to be able to provide to you? Daily maid service would be one thing. Maybe they can set you up with excursions. They can arrange for cooks that can come in or chefs and prepare a meal for you. Things like that, tickets to events. So you're doing more than just, here's the keys, enjoy your time at my property. There was I forget what's the ski resort, the name of it, that we were going to go up to, but somebody got sick with COVID and we couldn't make it. But the property itself, the proprietors of that property, they had a number of different things or options for us where they arranged to have skis brought in if we needed snowsuits or things like that. They provide for it, recommendations and car service to go out to dinner. So they were working extra hard to make sure we had a great time at this chalet. But also, because it's a short-term rental and the way they're renting it out, they're definitely providing what we call substantial services. So if you're doing this test down here, the 30 days, because your average rental period is more than 7, then again, you also have to either spend 100 hours or 500 hours. So that's that material participation element of the property. So why do you want to look at this, and why is this important to you, or should you consider turning one of your properties into a short-term rental? Well, it's as I stated earlier, it's the tax benefits that come from it. So I have a client right now that is closing on a fourplex. All right, there's this fourplex that this client's closing on in Dallas. Now, this property here that they're closing on is $1.4 million. And during our discussion, what I said to her is that she should take this property, because initially what she wanted to do was close on it and turn it into a long-term rental, get into one-year lease agreements with tenants. I said, hold off on that for a moment. Okay, your husband is a physician, all right? You're a physician, so you make good money and you have relatively no tax deductions. So you can't qualify as a real estate professional. So the strategy that I'm going to tell you from a tax side won't benefit you all that much. How would you like it if we could find a way to generate for you, I don't know, $400,000, maybe even $500,000 in tax deductions, be able to harvest those for you? Now, of course, when you start talking about numbers like that, that gets everyone really interested, and they're thinking, man, that's something I would like to have, because if you're in a, say your effective rate, these people are in California, 45% tax rate, $500,000, that's basically putting $215,000, $20,000 back into their pocket by doing this one strategy. So as I explained, I said, let's take this property initially and turn it into a short-term rental. So you're going to turn that property into a short-term rental, but the key is you're going to have to manage it. You're going to have to do all the work, and you're going to have to log at least 100 hours before the end of the year and make sure no one else logs more time overall on this property, or you got to hit the 500 hours for it. So if you can do that for this year, then this property will qualify, provided the average rental period is 7 days or less, as a short-term rental. And if it qualifies as a short-term rental, then what we can do to harvest these tax deductions is come in and perform a cost segregation study on the property. Now, if you're not familiar with cost segregation, I have some videos on this, and it's what we call accelerated depreciation. You're going to break the property's components up into 5, 7, and 15 year and 27.5-year elements, and then take the 5, 7, and 15-year elements. What are those? Sinks, electrical wiring, HVAC, countertops, floorings, landscaping. Every component that really isn't that structural, we're going to depreciate it on a much shorter time period than the average 27.5 years for residential real estate. And right now, with bonus depreciation, we're able to go in then and take all of those properties, 5, 7, and 15-year property held that comprise this one fourplex, and we can deduct it all in year one. And so the strategy then is to perform the cost seg on the property, hopefully pick up between $400,000 to $500,000 in accelerated depreciation, bonus that out, and if you meet the test, then that becomes immediately deductible to you. So if she and her spouse bring in $1 million in income, they'll be able to take, if it was $500,000, $500,000 tax deduction, and now they're only paying tax on $500,000. Now, she is willing to commit to the efforts to do this, but one of the things she said is, hey, my only concern is I can't see myself doing this long term. I said, I get it. You can't see yourself doing it long term. Don't worry. You just have to do it for this tax year. Next tax year, turn it into a longer term rental. Now, what do I mean by a longer term rental? Well, anything over 30 days, right? To get it out of the short term rental area of the code. So it's got to be more than 31 days or more, and we're going to make it a long-term rental, and it'll fall back under that. So this is the plan. So if you own residential real estate, And it could be existing property that you own. If you want to use this strategy, if you own existing property, this would qualify. You can convert it from long-term into short-term, and then go in and look at providing a cost seg study, have that done on the property, and pick up some of those losses. But here's the key. If you have existing property, let's say I bought this property here, you have to make sure that this property that you own, that you want to perform this study on, was acquired after October 1 of 2017. It has to be acquired after October 1st of 2017. Actually, it could go back to September, but I forget the date. In order for it to qualify for that bonus depreciation. So if it's older than that, you're not going to get the bonus. You can still do a cost seg, but it may not be as beneficial as what I'm just sharing with you. A lot of interest in this topic, a lot of great questions, and I appreciate you watching my YouTube. Be sure to keep checking out the videos. If you haven't yet subscribed, recommend your friends. Take care, everyone.